Hey, welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. Welcome back. It's Tuesday. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company and managing partner of Saywitz Properties. And we are going to talk some more real estate. I want to welcome everybody. Thanks again for tuning in to the show. We have a unique set of circumstances today in terms of our show, so we're going to have a little different format. But before we get into that, I do want to do a shout out to the Denver Nuggets, who have recently clinched the NBA championships for the first time in 47 years. So congratulations to them. And to the Miami Heat, you'll be back next year, I'm sure. So with all of that said, it's a first for us today. Our guest has disappeared, and we're going to try and find him and bring him back on another show. And so in lieu of that, we're going to have a discussion with regards to the current state of the commercial real estate market, the residential real estate market, the economy. We're going to solve as many of the world's problems as we can in the next 25 to 30 minutes. And so to help me do that, we're going to have Paul Roberts from OC Talk Radio get in on the discussion. I always enjoy bantering with him before and after the show. Now we're just doing it live. Yeah. So, Paul, welcome back.
I get a rare chance to ask you the questions that I hear all the time, or the questions I wonder why I don't hear all the time. And the one I don't hear that much about, that you've touched on, and I read about it every so often, is what's happening in downtowns. Downtown LA, downtown San Francisco. These high-rise office buildings are sitting, I won't say half empty, but 20% empty or whatever. And a bunch of them are going back to the bank, the rumors are.
Well, you got to look at the overall economy, and you've got to look at the dynamics of urban versus suburban environment, right? And so I think, again, I'm no prognosticator, and while some people might call me an expert, I'm just making most of it up. But the fact of the matter is, you go back and you look at COVID, and you look at what happened where people's living environments were disrupted, where they stopped going to offices, they started working from home. And so living in a small apartment, living in a downtown area where nothing's open is not that attractive. So you had people flee from the downtown urban environment and go looking for alternatives, and they're not coming back yet. And I guess the question will be, do they ever, or how soon, and what makes them come back? And then you combine that with the fact that you have increased crime as a result of either reduced law enforcement, as a result of just the economic environment. You can point the finger any way you want. You can point it at your government officials, but you have increased crime in urban Los Angeles, in urban San Francisco, in urban Portland, and in other cities around the country, Chicago, right? I mean, crime is way up. The cost of living in these urban environments is very, very expensive. And then why am I there if it's not safe and some of the stuff's not open or went out of business, didn't come back? And if I don't have to be there for work, why am I there, right? And so now you take all of that and you go, well, what's up, right? And so there was a statistic that did come out that 1 in every 5 offices in downtown Los Angeles and in downtown San Francisco are currently empty or unoccupied. Now, that doesn't mean that the tenant is not paying rent on that space, but what it does mean is that those companies have either just called it a day, or they still have not been able to bring their employees back to work. And so that creates a certain softening of the office market.
What's the big commercial office owner? Is it Brookfield? Is that one?
Well, that's the one that recently went back to the bank, but that is an example of what I think people are prognosticating of what's to come. Right, so the logic and the coffee talk, if you will, and we have it in our office, is what happens if your building's half empty or a third empty and you can't fill it? Right, and so the average office user, I'm going to take Orange County as an example, the average size of office space for a company that needs office space in Orange County is less than 3,000 square feet. So if I have a large building and I have 100 or 200,000 feet to rent, I either got to find a really big company to take a big chunk of it, or I got to make a lot of deals.
Right.
And that just doesn't happen overnight. And so it's going to take time. That what's interesting and the dynamic that hasn't really happened yet, and the shoe that hasn't fallen, is prices, while they've come down a little bit on the office side, prices, while they've come down, I think flattened on the residential side, have not fallen off a cliff, right? And so you don't see this mad panic.
They're not giving it away.
Not yet, right? And so the question is, will it be ever? Will it come? Or is there still just a combination of pent-up demand for certain aspects of it, combined with still low inventory from a sales standpoint? But look, if you have to rent office space and your note is coming due with the bank and your interest rate's going to double, which means your mortgage is going to double, and you can't fill your office building, now you have people looking in the mirror going, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And for people who haven't personally guaranteed it, like a Brookfield, which is a big corporation, there's no guarantee. They just say, here, I'm going to give it to the bank. And then the bank will turn around and then they will fire sale it back to someone else. Now, what happens in that environment? Right, so Brookfield walks away from it. They lose some money, but they lose less money than if they tried to stay with it and solve the problem, because they figured out this is a better scenario. And so they'll fight another day, and they lost their asset. The bank is protected because they theoretically had a loan that they can sell the property for at or more than what the loan is worth, and so they really aren't hurt at the moment. Unlike the recession in 2008 to 2010, where you had property values at 50 cents on the dollar and everybody was taking haircuts, you don't necessarily see that at the moment. And so then the buyer who comes along who buys it at a number where he can actually make some sense.
So take me back to the 80s. When I first came to California, the Japanese were everywhere, flush with cash and buying marquee properties, famous high-rises, famous hotels. They wanted, marquee properties that would just never go down in value, only go up. And of course, that didn't turn out well for them. They ended up selling a lot of those for less than they bought them. At least that was my perception. Are we just reliving that cycle where people overpaid and now somebody's going to come in at a discount, scoop it up, and start that cycle all over again?
Well, you haven't seen that widespread like you saw in the 80s and the early 90s. And also the difference is you have different buyers in today's environment. And so if you have other funds or other well-heeled investors, they're also buying it for different reasons, and may not be doing it like the Japanese did, where their economy and their dollar, if you will, the yen, was much stronger than the dollar, so they were taking advantage of it.
Right.
Now you have people just placing it into real estate as opposed to other things. But the other side of it is you don't have this mass defaulting yet. And what people keep talking about is that it's coming, right? And I don't want to be
That's what I wonder.
Right. I don't want to be, it is coming. I mean, I don't want to be negative Nancy, but look, if my mortgage doubled and I could not raise rents and I had vacancy, you're in a world of hurt. So I think you're going to see, whether it's bigger companies, maybe just say, hey, forget it, I'm walking away. And they will fight another day. And then I think you're going to see small and middle-sized investors go, I can't do this, right? I mean, you combine that with the fact that we have insurance policy premiums on properties in our own portfolio that are basically going up 20, 30, 40, even 50% from what they were last year. And that's a result of the fact that insurance companies don't like California. They don't want to insure here. Some of them are just tightening their belt. They've had losses from fires or floods or you name it, and they just don't want to do it. And so they raise the premiums to try and cover themselves, and then there's less players in the market, so they continue to run up the prices. You cannot raise someone's rent by 2, 3, 4, 5%, which would be a nominal, reasonable, historical increase, and keep pace with 20, 30, 40% increases.
Right.
Taxes will continue to go up. Utilities are up 30-40%, right? Trash continues to go up.
Trash, things we never think about, things like
Right,
trash and cleaning services.
Sure, but as a building owner, these are all things that you have to deal with, right? And then you have just maintenance and construction costs are still very high. And then you combine that with increased labor costs for whatever it is that you're doing. And so, we have tenants and they say, hey, how come you raised my rent 10%? I go, hey, our costs are up 20%. I actually lost ground. I don't expect any sympathy from you, but I want you to understand the dynamic that's going on. People don't care. They care about what their own pocketbook is, which I get. But at the same time, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you have soaring expenses, and then you cannot keep pace with that. And there is a day that comes.
What's the ripple effect? All right, so we don't seem too worried that you have a guest that came on here a while ago. Was it Cushman Wakefield or somebody? And they just casually said that 5 office towers in downtown LA. 5 of them. How many office towers are there? 10, 15 of them, 20? 5 of them are going back to the bank. San Francisco, they're talking about the same issue. New York, Portland, other places, Chicago, places around the country here. Partly because people during the pandemic learned to work from home. Partly because well,
companies have a new model, right? So they're not requiring, you read about it every day in the news or on the internet, that companies are requiring their employees to come back to work, whether that's part-time, full-time, and they're not necessarily interested in people that have zero desire to come to work. Now, there are certain jobs you can just do from home and it's fine. But there are others where you really need the synergy as a company, and then there are people who need the synergy to be able to function. And so I say long term, there has to be some sort of model with that. And then the people who really don't want to go to an office and don't want to work, they will find a job that fits with whatever it is that they want to do. And they'll hang out in their garage or their patio or their home office, and they'll do what they need to do.
So when shopping malls started to look bad, and we've seen it here in Southern California, you simply tear them down and you repurpose the land. You build something else there.
Well, your keyword there, though, is simply. I don't know that there's any simply in it.
Yeah. Simply. Do we simply implode these buildings like some long-lost Vegas casino? And,
no, you're going to have a retrade, and you're going to have somebody who buys it that can fight another day. And whether that's a more healed, better healed financial owner, or whether that's somebody who actually just bought it at a particular price. Historically, people have a fallacy that real estate goes up forever. So if I buy my house, and people make the mistake of comparing houses to office buildings, and it's not the same. You buy your house and you sit on it and you pay your mortgage and 30 years later, it's going to be worth more than what you paid. It just has to be because of cost of living. And so people say, oh, my house is worth 2 times, 3 times, 10 times what I paid for it. Part of that's the market. Part of that is just cost of living. From an office building standpoint, it's a cycle. It does not go up forever.
Yeah.
And the reason is an office building trades based on the rental income, not based on the location or the intrinsic value of the real estate. Keep in mind, an office building gets older as time goes on.
Yeah.
It costs more to maintain it, but it's just purely a function of the rent. And so the rent is a function of the real estate cycle. It's a bell curve. If you buy it at the bottom of the bell curve and then you sell it at the top, you will make money. And so people go in and out of office buildings all the time. It is not an issue of I'm going to hold this forever and it's just going to continue to go up and become a better asset. It's a function of interest rate. It's a function of cap rate. It's a function of cash flow.
So when I came to Orange County in the 90s, it seemed like there were no shortage of high-flying developers who were all building shopping centers and high-rise office towers. They were getting thrown up all over the county here, all over the country. That seemed to be kind of the most prestigious part and the most permanent part of a commercial portfolio. Shopping centers and high-rise. You're never going to lose in those. Apartments might go up or down.
But things change, right? So
things change. Now you're in the hot part of the market, apartments, and you had Bill Shophoff here. He buys all these tilt-up.
Well, he's buying shopping centers and tearing them down, right? Look, exactly. The market dictates highest and best use. And the market is a breathing animal. It changes, right? So apartments are a necessity of life because people need a place to live. And they have become a much higher and better use than an office building that's sitting half empty.
But when we had tons of land to build, nobody wanted an apartment. They all want a house, right?
Okay,
So-
but now you don't have tons of land to
Yeah.
build, depending upon where you are, right? So if you go to Texas, you have plenty of land. And so you spread. And then you see just more of the same. So you'll
Right.
build homes, you'll build apartments, you'll build retail around it. In Southern California, you don't have that luxury. You got to knock something else down, or you got to find an opportunity where there is some vacant land. But it's also then, if I had a choice, what do I build? So now you have office buildings being torn down, and replacing them are either multifamily or apartments or industrial, because that's the hot ticket. In
they
anyone's
tore that-
wildest dream, you wouldn't think an industrial building would get more rent than an office
Yeah,
building.
they tore. We're in Orange County. This is maybe too inside baseball, but down by Costco, off of whatever that is, Crown Valley, there was a pretty nice office building, probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 stories or 10 stories or something here. It's not that old, and they tore it down and turned it into apartments. I couldn't believe that. The cost of building that building and doing all that, and then they decided,
Well,
whoops.
and that, yeah, right. And look, that model had to have penciled in that day at that time. The question is, long term, will that model pencil going forward?
Right.
You don't see any office buildings getting built, right? You see
None.
it going the other way at the moment. Look, there was a time, 2010 to 2015, where the thing of the day was owner-user small buildings.
Yeah,
Right. So that was a thing, or small medical buildings.
Right,
And-
commercial condos. Or
People were
whatever.
selling them for a very high per square foot price, very high return to the developer. And then that just went away, right? And because there was a better use of building one bigger building than a bunch of smaller ones. So you don't see that anymore. So now what happens is limited inventory for this owner user type stuff. And so when there is something that comes on the market, then people jump on it, and it's still at a pretty good clip. But it's interesting because you also have to look at the overall economy and the dynamic of business. And so what I like about Orange County, and I've always liked ever since I moved here, is the diversity of the economic environment here in Southern California and Orange County in particular. It's not tied to smokestacks. It's not tied to technology like it would be in the Silicon Valley.
Right.
It's not tied to old school lawyers and accountants like you would see maybe in downtown Chicago or something like that. And
Right.
so
It's not a one-act town.
no, it's not a one-act town, and there is new businesses starting up all the time, and there are other businesses that would like to come here if it makes financial sense. There's not a lot of reasons from the state's perspective and an economic perspective to want to do business in California, but it's a nice place to live, so people want to be here, right? So
Everybody tells you over and over in this show, 100 reasons don't do business in California, don't do business in LA. And then you say, great, so where are you moving? Oh, I'm not moving anywhere.
right. But there's statistics where I just heard that Walmart is closing a whole bunch of their stores in Chicago, and that they stated the reason they closed them is public safety and safety for their employees, because they have so much crime and so many break-ins and so much retail theft, not only from within but from without, of people breaking in. I think there was a statistic or something that in Portland that there was an average break-in to a retailer that every 3 days they were getting broken
Oh, my
into.
goodness.
I mean, that's how unsafe it was in downtown Portland. So they finally just said, hey, forget it. And so if you have major retailers just going, look, forget it. I mean, it's too tough. Why am I going to keep banging my head against the wall?
Right.
Then what happens to that? That there is a trickle down
That's what I was
eventually.
going to say. So walk me through the trickle-down effect. If these downtowns, maybe implode's too hard a word, but if they start to shrink, if they start to go backwards here, these buildings go back to the bank, and now they're resold at a lower price, and they still can't get people to come down because it isn't the rent's too high, it's people don't want to work that way anymore.
Well, it's the economic model doesn't pencil. Whether the rent's too high or not, I can't pay my mortgage with the income I have coming in,
Right.
and my expenses might be too high, my rent might be too low, it might be that I can't fill it, it might be a combination of all of those things,
So
right?
what's the domino effect?
Well, the domino effect is, look, people aren't going to go into the urban environment. They're just going to stay at home or go to the suburban environment and go, I don't need to go there. Second is, you're going to see prices come down. You're going to see buildings retrade. and then you'll see what the long-term effect of that is. But that also doesn't happen overnight. There's no, I wake up on Monday and everybody's giving their property back to the bank. Geez, I hope not. I mean, you know, in 2008, even it didn't happen in a month, but it happened very quickly. I don't think you're going to see that here, but I do think that you're going to see other opportunities that will come available because of other people's missteps or because of the circumstances that they have. And so what we're starting to see, and you can see it in the home market here in Southern California, you can see it to a certain degree in the apartment market. It's also public perception. Right. So if you read and you hear and you see that the market is softening, or you see that there are more properties coming on the market, or new properties that don't get leased or sold in a day or two like they were, then what happens is buyers and renters get aggressive because they figure, I can, why the heck not? And so they start hitting below the belt. So I'll give you an example. If you had a property that was renting for $6,000 a month, that was a condo by the beach, and somebody comes along and says, I'll give you $5,000 a month. And then the landlord says, forget, what do you, it's insulting, right? And the guy says, okay, fine. I have time, right? I'm going to go around and I'm going to find one person that's desperate, or one person that doesn't care because their basis is lower. Right. And eventually they might find that person, right? When the market was hot, people would laugh at you, and eventually you would not find that one person. Right. And you would have to adjust your own thinking. But now you find that one person, and then you tell your friend, hey, I got this deal, and they took $5,000 instead of $6,000. And then when he does it, he goes and does the same thing. And so I think what you have going on now, we're in a very tumultuous situation in that you have a disconnect between buyer and seller, landlord and tenant, and even broker in the middle, because the seller is trying to hold on to yesterday's number as best he can, and it's not happening. And then the buyer is trying to set tomorrow's number, which is below the belt, to drive it down. Right. And the broker in the middle is trying to just make a deal so he can make some money. And the market is, I don't want to call it chasing the market down, but you're chasing a market. And if you had 10 offers on a property before, you might have one now. And now there's nobody to chase.
So we making less deals today here?
Oh, yeah. So what we hear from, whether it's the escrow companies or the title companies or the residential real estate brokers or even the commercial real estate brokers, the activity is down, right? And it's way down across the board because people are in a wait and see mode. People are doing this haggling or the searching or going, hey, I have time, right? The perception before it was, if tomorrow's deal is more expensive than today's deal, I need to get off the fence and make it happen. Right. If the perception is that tomorrow's deal could be better than today's deal, why do I want to make a deal? I'll just haggle and I'll just wait. And if this deal doesn't happen, I'm not going to cry. And then I'll give you an example. One of our on-site managers just this last week, he said, hey, I found a place. It's a probate. They're desperate to sell it. And, I think I'm going to move. And I said, great, good for you. And he said, oh, it's a nice place. It's got a pool. It's got a jacuzzi. And it needs some fix-up. And I said, how many other people are looking at it? And he says, I'm the only one at the moment. And so I'll let you know in a couple of days. And then he texted me back and he said, I didn't get the house. I said, why not? He said, somebody else came in and offered more money. Yeah. And so you have this perception that he thought he was in control, right? And he offered something that he thought was fair in his own mind. And then somebody else came along and you
said something interesting a while ago that stuck in my brain here. You're in the middle. I mean, you're a property owner, but you also have a brokerage. And so you're that guy trying to make a deal. And
look, I would just say, whether you're a property owner or whether you're the broker or whether you're the buyer, if you have some motivation to make a deal, you need to be making deals. Yeah. Right? As a broker, you need to make deals to eat and live. As a landlord, you need to make deals to keep your properties full. And then as a buyer, as a tenant, you either have plenty of time because I don't have to make a deal, or I have a lease coming up, or I have to move, or I have some event. Those are things that, as a broker, you want to track because you have to make a deal, right? My lease is up in August. I got to make a deal by August.
So what struck me is you said you like it if the market is going one way or the other. If it's going up, people are frantic to make a deal because, it's going to be more expensive tomorrow. If the market's going down, people are frantic to make a deal to get out before it goes any further here. So you've got this psychology driving people to make a deal. But when it's in this kind of up and down holding
wait and see,
pattern.
right?
Wait and see. Nothing
That's
happens.
right. And as a broker, that's the worst scenario you could have, because the only deals that get made are people that have to make a deal because of an event, and everybody else is sort of sitting on the sideline waiting to see what
Death,
happens.
divorce, something here, whatever.
Right, and so again, you don't see some rampant run up or some rampant falling off of a cliff, so people are waiting. And then, in terms of the interest rates, people are waiting. Some people think it's going to go down, so maybe I'll wait a year. Some people are like, hey, it's already up, so I already missed the boat anyway. But it is much more difficult to get a loan out there today, and you will get a lesser loan with more strings attached and more questions asked by the lender. I mean, that's just a fact of life.
All right, so last question, 2 minutes left. Look into your crystal ball, pull it out, polish it up. 2 years from now, what's it look like? We've cleared an election. It's certain somebody's president. We've gone through the cycle, and do we get more certainty? Do the trends continue? Do they reverse? What? Look into that crystal ball.
If I had a crystal ball, I would save it and then I would sell it. But I would say 2 years from now, I say LeBron's still playing. They have a decent shot.
You
at
do?
winning.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not sure he is. I think he might.
Either that or he's coaching at USC with his son. I don't know. But look, we are dealing from our own business standpoint in today's world, and then you have to look at it and go, what are we looking at 90 days out? What are we looking at 6 months out? Right? It's hard to predict what happens a year or 2 years out, because I think you're going to have a lot of things in the economy that are going to dictate what winds up happening, and part of that gets back to what happens with the election and what is public and economic policy.
But when you're buying commercial real estate, the assumption is you're going to hold it for a long time. These aren't the flippers.
It depends. I mean, then what is a long time? Is it I hold it for 30 years or I hold it for 5 years?
Yeah.
Right? I think as a real estate guy, you have to look at the deal in today's world, and you have to say, does this thing pencil today, or at least in the short term? And so the idea or the promise of, you could buy this property and you can renovate it and you can raise the rents, that just doesn't hold in today's environment. There's just so much risk out there that it's hard to be able to do that. And if you find a property that has good bones or has a good location that you really like, then that's one thing. But it's much a riskier deal for a property owner, a developer, or a value-added person to do it.
So it's not a 20-year horizon. You're not trying to polish the crystal ball all the time. You're trying to say, does this make sense now? And yet you say so many times, week after week, you come in here and say, I don't know who's buying this stuff. It doesn't pencil right now.
Well, right. I mean, it's somebody who has to make a deal, and the people who have money that are sitting on the sidelines, some of them are being smart with their money, waiting and seeing. And others are just out haggling, looking for a deal. And so you don't have the kind of activity, whether it's your house that you're selling or whether it's your apartment building that you're selling or your office building. The activity and the people out there are just less. I mean, it just is. And so what will bring them back is the promise of lower interest rates, the promise of a stronger, better economy, the promise of people coming back to work and companies taking a harder line stance. And then the question is, how does that go, right? Does that go, and not with picking on the president, but does that go with the current environment, the current game plan that the president has in place for the country?
And the perception that creates, that we're on the right track.
Sure.
Or on the wrong
or
track,
do you have an election? Do you get a different president, whoever it is, right? Is it Trump? Is it a Republican? Is it a different set of circumstances? And then will that spur some other different economic activity? And I just say, look, people are going to vote when it comes time to vote based on the person, on the personality, and then also on their policy, and not necessarily in that order. Different people have different things that they vote for, and I guess we'll have to see.
We'll end with that. We were talking beforehand, and unlike most elections, there doesn't seem to be many people who are undecided one way or another, at least at a national level. We've solidified into our positions here, and rightly or wrongly, we've already sort of decided who we're going to vote for. So I don't know.
I mean, I could tell you this with 100% certainty, that I do believe that the next president will either be Democratic or Republican.
I'm not so sure. Ask No Labels. They're trying to run a third party here again.
After that, I don't have much. Right? I would just say, for folks out there, and we'll try and sum it up and bring it all together, because nobody's got the perfect answers in today's world.
I thought you did.
Now, I try and bring those people on the show, and then we'll try and pick their brain for free. But we'll try again next week. But in terms of for people out there, as far as making decisions and doing what they're doing, you're seeing a lot of people who said, hey, I'm not going to sell my house. I'm not going to move. Maybe I'll do a minor remodel. Maybe I'll just cover up and wait 12 months and see what happens.
That's me.
Right. So different strokes for different folks. But I would tell you, keep tuning in and watch and see what happens. And we'll try and keep our eye on the pulse. That's it.
Yeah, you got your finger in the pulse. I want to see when it's going to shift. I want to know when the market starts to move, when it gets out of this stuck phase. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. I don't know. I'd be curious to see.
I'm hoping that the market moves around the same time as the sun comes out here in Southern California, and that both of those are sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. Take us out.
All right. Listen, I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. Thanks to everybody, viewers, listeners, those who are just playing it in the background while they're doing something else. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be back here next week. We're going to be talking more real estate, and we'll try and answer some more questions and solve some more of the world's problems.
And hopefully our guests will show up.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.